have, I want to say this right, Laura Weilert. Did I get that right? Okay, whew, I practiced in my mind. She is with the Science Fairy. If you guys might remember, I totally remember her. She made an impact on me. When we were over at the warehouse about a year ago, she gave a wonderful presentation on her business. And she's gone through some pretty incredible changes over the last year, and we should all be excited to hear her update. Come on up, Laura!
There we go. It is so wonderful to be up here after a year of interesting changes in business, but also a big change for me. And you see her working the room over there with Danielle. So exactly 1 year ago today, I became a mom. So not only was I the Science Fairy, but I was a new mom. And the beautiful thing about my little Science Fairy kingdom, now I call it my momdom, and it's a perfect blend for how my life goes. And I'm going to get into that in the specifics a little later. What I do is I go to daycares. Right now I'm sticking to daycares, not centers, home daycares, where women take in 8 kids and do licensed care. So I go to daycare, and what do? I have a box. And sometimes the materials spill out of the box. Other times they stay hidden. And they go through a different theme or a project, right? Science fair project. And I deliver those, and they're hands-on, and it's specifically for preschoolers. So my age range total is from 2 to 8. Now, pre-COVID, I did a lot of festivals and a lot of family events, and those have all kind of petered out. The library has also been very generous with their programming. So that's what I'm looking at, that side of things. So I've doubled down on my core business, which is the family child care homes. The community is amazing. If I have a question about Clara's development or a problem I have, I can talk to my customers while I'm there, and they have decades of experience with everything related to what I'm having a problem with. So stepping back into where the Science Fair came from is I love social impact. I love our Center for Social Impact, CS4SI. That's all right, okay, details. Anyway, the idea of social impact business and business to do good really stuck with me as a millennial and as someone looking in a forecast of what the future holds, hopefully, eventually. Now, I had been in nonprofit, knew that world, decided I don't know business, so I could go get an MBA at how much it would cost. And so instead, I started a business, and it was originally 6 ideas, got whittled down to STEM inspiration and STEM inspiration for younger kids, that's hands-on learning, so that they can take those skills, and though they don't know the words for the science, they know the concept because they've played with a rope and done this and understood frequency. So if we're singing a high note, it's going really fast, and we're singing a low note, it's moving less. A kid's not going to experience that unless someone introduces it to them. And because early education is about as far from math and science as you can get, there's a real need in that niche for someone with a little more technical knowledge. Back to community. I have been so blessed in terms of getting materials for Who Gives a Scrap? Has everyone heard Who Gives a Scrap? Yep, regular there. The Restore. I recently got hinges at the Restore, so we did a lesson on hingineering. I love it because my day-to-day work is either delivering lessons to kids, getting Clara ready to go, or coming back, and then when I have a free moment, I get out to my workbench in my garage, and I have all these educational materials, and I'm there with a drill trying to figure out which hinge was supposed to be hooked to the block and which way, and the tinkerer in me is like, yes! And that's been a joy. So I call myself a maker of experiences, and so tinkering is part of that, and I've made a lot of materials on my own. So it's a little DIY looking, but the beauty of that is children can see materials that they have access to, so when they are tinkering in kindergarten, they're going to excel at that. I had one little girl go on to pre-K after my lessons. She was there for about 7 lessons, and they told her that she was superior to her peers in STEM. And she's actually been back later as a school-age kid during the summer, And I asked her how science was in school. She's like, we don't do toys, we don't do stuff like this, we just listen. And it broke my heart. So when it comes to education, I'm a bit of an oddball rebel. I don't believe in one right answer, which by second grade, kids are trained to have one right answer, and their curiosity has really been squelched, and they're not seeking out new experiences. They're nervous about failing because they've never failed safely in the educational setting. I do try and reach certain standards for curriculum, but those are also my standards for early education. Whether that's fine motor skills or understanding orientation, a lot of the things I do involve spatial development, because that's what they've shown is the key to scientific and mathematical understanding, is that intelligence of spatial awareness. And we hear a lot of gender divide in the ECE community around girls in STEM. And one thing we know is that girls develop fewer spatial skills based on the toys they're playing with. So if they're playing with blocks and Legos, they're developing those skills. I'm getting a 1-minute warning, so I'm going to move on to the pivot I did. In lockdown, I decided to get my materials a little better organized, which is difficult for me. And I decided to do subscription boxes directly to parents. So there's my little modified logo. Now these boxes come as a subscription, and they have materials that are reusable. So this one is on telephony, which is both technology and history. So these are my carrier pigeons. Good tie-dolls. Good use for those. And they have a little canister on them, and so the kids can throw to their sibling. The secret message. Yes, right there.
Tell us more about your boxes.
So the boxes have materials that I think would be useful in a home setting that kids might actually be able to recreate themselves once they give the box back. The hope with that is it kind of promotes recycling, because the other products on the market are like Tinker Crate or Kiwi Crate. Those come in their cheap wood and lots of paper, which is not terrible for the environment, but it all gets chucked anyway. And so parents are like, did I really pay all this money to chuck this? So this goes back so they don't have to hang out with all the toys that just, reproduce in the living room. So this all comes back. So the history on this one here, example of a material in one of my boxes, is a humidifier. So you can turn this on and make smoke, so smoke signals. Nice. Very old technology, but solving a problem of communicating over a distance, which is the whole point of telephony. And when you pinch it, it gets little different bursts. So that's just something that I thought of once and found it on Amazon. And so the boxes have materials that are probably worth, I don't know, $60 to replace. And then I charge $60 for 2 boxes. So it's a 2-box subscription every 2 weeks. Honestly, I've had a really hard time marketing it. Really hard time. I've done some Facebook ads, some Instagram, some sort of closer friend. So I've trialed it out 3 times, but I'm still struggling, and that's where I'm looking for input from the business community of like, how do you market something like this, which is very COVID friendly, right? I drop this off, I take it back, I sanitize it, I drop off another box, and we repeat, especially with kids doing homeschool or what they're calling pandemic pods. Those are all markets. So how do I convey that at this time? That's been the challenge with the boxes, but they've been fun to create. Yes. Oh, you're good, in the gray.
Oh, me? Okay, sorry. So it sounds like you delve a little bit into like history and culture as well. Is that the case, or do you kind of stay in the science realm? I'm just thinking with the smoke signal and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I try and stay in the science realm with a lot of, if I can put in some history from non-colonial history, if it's something like smoke signals. I am very glad that I'm working with home child cares because it's much more diverse. So 65% of my students at any lesson on average, well, it sounds weird, but are white versus in the Colorado Springs community, which is 78%. that's cool. And so there's just little instances where we did Mr. Squashy Face. So I took a butternut squash and made him into a Mr. Potato Head. And so the idea was that we were going to create the parts. So we had pipe cleaner arms that looked like Forky from Toy Story, and ears. And so the package ears that come with Mr. Potato Head are pink. And so I created a mold, we put glue in it, and then we painted it with nail polish. And I realized I had some nail polish, but it's like, that's kind of, what if the Mr. Potato Head had brown ears? So I found some brown nail polish, and one of the girls pointed out, she's like, I love this color. And little things like that are going to remove this stigma around science being an ivory tower for boomer white male men. Sorry. That encouragement and having girls confident is another huge component of what I do. I tell them, you can be an engineer. Oh, you're really persistent at that. All of those things that we know from early childhood are helpful to children. And like I said, Precious was told she's superior to her peers in STEM, but hopefully she doesn't get squelched by second grade. So more encouragement for her. Yeah.
I love your idea, by the way, and it's so good to see you after last year's presentation. To see what you're doing to work with current times.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the difference in cognitive function for children who are raised doing things like this versus kids that are on tablets and just being occupied. How does that affect their function of their brain and how they, relate into adulthood, things like that?
I would love to fully be able to answer that question when
I know
I'm 60.
it's a lot.
Yeah, because I'm fascinated by cognitive neuroscience. That's my goal, is to get a higher degree in that once Science Fair is franchised and making enough money that I can just, do what I want. But there is a cognitive difference in the way children learn with their hands versus just with their eyes. And a lot of kids are kinesthetic and they're completely lost in the school system. They're told, oh, maybe you should get a trade, like that's a curse. Like, no. If you can not go to college, have a trade, and not have that debt, you're pretty much in the same progressive of life as a kid who went to college. So what I'm hoping is the kids who are already in a position where the college is not an option, that knowing STEM better will help them excel in their careers by being able to do the math and being able to think innovatively. So kids are going to see materials used in a different way, which leads them to what innovation looks like. And that innovation could happen on a tablet. But it's unlikely. They say only 10% of tablet programs for kids, or virtual programs for kids, are actually grounded and actually educational. The rest are entertainment. So with that, with hands-on materials, obviously it can't be on the tablet. Yeah, I'll play a song and we'll dance the skeleton dance on my tablet, or we use it as a magnifier, but that's not the star of the show. And as kids go more on tablets, they're not going to have these real-world experiences, and it's very, very sad to me. So that's why I do what I do. I saw Frank.
Hi, Laura. You were one of the first people that I met when we in Cubs, I remember.
Wonderful.
And I wanted to know a little backstory, if you could give that to us. Why does Laura Weilert do this? What motivates you to reach the audience that you reach in the science realm?
That is a very, I appreciate your question, Frank. I'm going to say. So in high school, biology came very naturally to me. And I had a teacher, Rhoda Clark, and she always made interesting things. So when we were studying DNA plasmids, we actually cut paper out and re-glued it and all that kind of stuff. So that stuck with me. So one influence in high school. Another influence in childhood was Judy Walk, and she is the craft queen. Like, she probably created half of Pinterest ideas before Pinterest was ever created. She's amazing. So she taught me creativity. So I was holding on to those things, and I had positioned myself to be an MCDB, molecular cellular developmental biologist at CU. And I was working in the lab with the same 5 people. And they were wonderful people, but I was just like, oh, I think I'm extroverted. And so I went into nonprofit kind of to be able to come back home, and I couldn't really work in the sciences here. And so I was just kind of hanging out there realizing, hey, I've got years coming up, so what am I doing with that science degree on the shelf? And realized that I did enjoy inspiration, and I did enjoy working with 3-year-olds. My mom's like, I hated the 3s, I hated it. I'm like, 3-year-olds are awesome. And then you hand them back to their parents, and they're little hellions. So that group kind of naturally developed there just because that's where no one was working. There's so many STEM promotion things in K through 12 completely, but not in early education. And that was the gap I saw. So I went to PPCC, got a certificate in early childhood education, learned about best practice so that I could do classroom control because that was not one of my skill sets going in. And it's been a good journey. You know, I think, well, I should have been a doctor. I should have been all these other things had my 20s worked out differently. But having recovered and been in full remission from mental health, I was like, okay, I need something that's very conducive to my lifestyle, not stressful, not a 9 to 5. I'm in charge of my own time. I can have a daughter, and she's doing great, and still manage to be a professional as well.
Thank you.
Yes?
2 parts. Number 1, what is the age range for your boxes?
The age range for these is 2 to 8, with an understanding that it's closer to 3 to 5, because 2 to 8 is a large range. Usually the 8-year-old will be like, oh yeah, I'm not doing this. This is kid stuff. And then like an activity and a half in, they're like, can I do that? And the 2-year-olds are awesome. The 2-year-olds, you give one of the parts of the project, and they just go to town, like they just focused. It's like it takes a whole nother activity for them to like come back to where the rest of the class is because they have such a longer attention span than the 3-year-old. So that's it, 2 parts?
And the second one is what you said these are subscriptions. What is the cost of this subscriptions?
The cost, each box comes out to $30, but I sell them in a set. My hope is that I gain a customer not just from one box, and it also gives me a little more substantial income versus always finding that one next customer. And that's for 2 weeks.
The boxes are every 2 weeks? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yes?
With the disruption that COVID is having in the education system, how do you think your idea can impact in a positive way?
I believe the impact really comes down to the energy level of the person guiding the box. And when I do it, it's easy because I have the energy, I'm excited, all that. If a teacher has one more thing on their plate right now, they're not going to take it on. That's the challenge where COVID is, where I think the promise is, and I'm glad you brought this up because it kind of got me thinking, is to make these for, right now they're made up for 4 learners. If I made them up for 8 or 16 as I scale up, so have multiple boxes of the same kind, that could deliver to a classroom, but it also could, well, you can't deliver to the classroom there. Never mind, bad idea. So really it's limited locally because shipping costs are so much, because I would love to have the impact of these boxes reaching kids and teachers seeing themselves as a little more confident in them and not having to dig up, because these hands-on activities are not going to happen in COVID learning. They're not. So they're all that more important. So if these can arrive and kids can do this, they're not going to get the cutting apart of the plasmids thing that I got in my education. It's going to be less and less and less and less. My goal to have greater impact is to franchise. I have some people in Kansas City who's expressed interest, someone in Virginia, and that I've developed all the lessons, all the materials. They buy up the inventory. If it doesn't work out for them, they sell that inventory to some other science fairy. So the startup costs are very low, and going back to social impact, it's a huge investment for people trying to do science and STEM. If they invest $10,000 in a science fairy, that is going to continue to progress, as I have proven that it can be slightly profitable. Yes?
Can you ship them?
I haven't tried yet. They break pretty easily in this tub, as I have found out multiple times. And yeah, I mean, the UPS store is just up the street, so logistically it wouldn't be too bad for me. But yeah, it involved a little
Can you
more.
just sell the curriculum maybe and have them pick up the supplies there?
Possibly, but like I said, I'm an oddball in the educational system. I'm not a curriculum developer. That really does take a master's degree in curriculum to do that properly. I'm more the fun activities that are all related to science. Yes.
So this one's cell phony. Tell us about some of the other things that you do.
Okay, I have magnet masters, and it starts off with a pumpkin. Why? I don't know. No. So pumpkins have those ridges and the grooves, and so magnetic fields have that same shape. So I'll take have the kids take a marker, start at the top of the pumpkin, go down, because it always goes north to south. And so when they start at the bottom, I'm like, no, it goes this way, it goes this way. And so that's a beginning start of understanding something that's very complex. But when they see the diagram of an electric or magnetic field, they're like, oh, it looks like that pumpkin we drew on.
That's cool.
That's kind of the cool stuff. So Magnet Masters, I've got one on spin engineering, so things that spin. I've got a little cheap plastic solar, it's not a turbine, it's a motor. And it charges based on a solar panel. So all of those things are about spinning. And so it's really easy in STEM to do the science part. I really have to focus on how to do technology and engineering and math. So we just did a shapes lesson and the kids were engaged the whole time, which is always, I always like really push the engagement on the math ones, but they do pretty well. So. Oh, a bunch, yes.
So I'm going to take this. As a master's level prepared teacher, you have your curriculum, by the way. You are doing it. It doesn't take a whole lot. In fact, what you've done is you've worked backwards through designing a curriculum, just FYI. And to Titus's point, that I think could be a great place to look at and maybe even addition to another strength in your business.
Yeah.
So that also then leads to, have you thought about doing a YouTube channel or anything like that so that parents, when they do the subscription box, can have an idea and be like, hey, this is how the science fair did it, let's go do this. And it could just be something simple, and I'd like to talk to you offline about that. But
Okay.
would you consider something like that?
I would consider that. I have a few things up in terms of directions of how to do a specific thing, like build the dinosaur bones or things like that. So I have a few of those up, and I actually have a pretty good space in my house that I can film on at. And I also have a new spot that works. Actually, like, here's my voice on baby.
And you have a great test subject right here for your curriculum, just saying.
And she's so cute. She's going to be in all the Pinterest pictures when I get there. Yeah.
Going off the test subject, you just said, do you do focus groups, or how do you vet what's worth a child's time and can keep their attention?
Right, and that's the beauty of going to the home child cares, is it's a very grace-filled environment. And I'll start with one group that I know is going to give me some good data, or at least anecdotes, and then I'll repeat that lesson. So that's kind of my vetting process for the activities. This one went to the What If Festival last year, and was vetting it there. I realized the humidifier didn't come up fast enough, so they couldn't do this, and the cup wasn't the right thing to use. And so now I have that humidifier that I bought specifically for this, and I drew little flames on it too. I don't know if you guys can see that.
All right, it is time for our super special question. Let me see those hands in the air. Who wants to ask it? All right, Tyson.
What can we as a Colorado Springs community do to support you?
If you have kids or you're curious about what I do, just Google Science Fairy CO, Science Fairy Co. That tells Google you got the result you were wanting, and that improves my SEO. So I appreciate that. The other thing is you guys have some great ideas, so I do have to leave, but if we want to meet up for coffee, if you have some ideas for me for how to market this box part, that's really my big sticky point right now.
Fantastic.